personality.
And even for the sense of self. So maybe it's possible that our brain creates the sense of self and put it in the mind.
So then there is no self, there's just something that's created.
Yes, by the brain.
Well, okay, but...
And then it can be controlled by scientists, let's say, as a suggestion to the future. There are scientists that are talking about it, to make a better kind of people with a better sense of self, not so selfish. Because that can affect this area in the brain.
No, I mean that is a theory. If we say that the brain is the basis of everything, then we can work with that. But I mean, this is one of the so-called what's called a hard problem that neuroscientists and scientists have worked on for 40, 50 years now. How does conscious experience come from brain activity? And so far they've come up with no answers. Zero. They've got lots of theories, but they've not empirically shown anything. And so some scientists now, to overcome this so-called hard problem, are even denying that there is such a thing as conscious experience. To say there's no such thing as conscious experience, what do you say about that? Okay. And certainly also, I think from a neuroscience perspective, they've not found any controller. In fact, what they've found is a distributed system so far. So that's interesting. And I want to add some more on that shortly, but I need to say a few things first. It'll come more.
I wanted to share the experience of when I thought of me, where is the me?
Right.
I thought of how would I know this me, and I thought to see it. Like I thought of me looking at the mirror and oh, this is me. It's over there. So I went with that, and I thought, okay, that thought of searching for me, or actually someone who knows that is searching, that's the me. So
The knowing is?
Yeah.
Isn't that an activity?
No, the knower.
Oh yeah, the knower of that. Yeah, okay. So then
I
look for that.
Knower, and then
good.
And then I became the knower, and the knower was just something that I thought of.
Aha.
And it was like this, it was the loop. I was stuck.
Right.
Because
So
I turned my gaze at something, I became the knower, and the knower was something that I knew.
right. So there is a knower, yeah.
Yeah.
But you don't seem to be able to find it.
No, I couldn't.
Good. Very good. Perfect.
And about the hard problem.
The hard problem.
I think I don't remember who was the philosopher who said that there might be no way to solve it because, like, there was an experimental, a thought experiment about someone who sits in a dark room, in a room without colors, and he gains all the knowledge of how to perceive the color red.
Mm-hmm.
But then he steps out of his house and sees something red. If in that moment he's experiencing something that couldn't be explained, like a new experience. If he experienced something he couldn't anticipate, then that means that the hard problem is unsolvable because
You lost me somewhere there.
if we gain, hypothetically, we gain all knowledge of how the brain works, how the eyes work, and then when we saw that we experienced the red color, there was a new information, there was something new to be gained in that experience.
Something new, a different experience.
Yeah.
Right.
Then that means that the hard problem is unsolvable.
I don't see the logic there.
Okay, maybe
we're talking about not what experiences we can have, but how brain can generate experience in general.
Yeah, but there's the gap between the experience and the knowledge, or the experience and the mechanism. Because I can't explain to you, I can explain to you all day long that the color red is this amount of nanometers like wavelength, and there's the opsin in the eyes, and the nerve, and all that stuff.
Right.
But eventually I cannot transmit to you the experience of red.
Of course.
It's still subjective. So that's the essence of the heart problem. But
No, I don't think that's the essence of the heart problem. The essence is how brain activity leads to experience, not how we can understand each other's experiences. That's a different issue.
But if we know the mechanism fully,
for
creating experience,
for how experience comes from brain activity.
Yeah.
Well, they haven't gone anywhere with
then
that.
we can like if we knew hypothetically that, then we could generate it in someone else. Yeah, I could.
Hypothetically.
I could know that you are experiencing exactly the same thing as me.
But this is from a Buddhist perspective, will never happen because the experience is not coming from the brain.
All right. Well,
the brain is not generating experience.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Yeah.
During meditation, when you say body, do you mean my conceptual perception of the body or the five sense consciousness?
The physical body.
But I find myself confused because I don't have any direct perception of my physical body.
You don't? You don't feel your body?
I have the sense consciousness of my tactile sensations.
Correct. Good. That's body.
Okay. So it's the sense.
I mean, of course, if you open your eyes, you could also see body visually. Sorry?
That's also the sense.
Yeah, right. But that's an experience. That's a valid experience. I mean, that's how we validly establish anything. I mean, we look and we go, Of course, we understand it conceptually, but the experience is a direct experience with the senses. We validate the existence of heart through the senses.
So when you say body, you mean my central conception of the body?
Your direct experience of the body, not your imagination of what that might look like. That's conceptual. So we're talking about direct experience.
Direct through the senses.
Correct.
And the feeling, it's the same like feeling, no? Like neutral, unpleasant, it's sensations, no?
Well, at the physical level, at the mental level, it's not sensations.
Regarding this practice, I find myself looking for the self, especially like in the central channel, and like concentrating quite hard on it. And last year you said about like not focusing so much on the central channel for long because of subtle energies. And
Well, yeah, okay. I mean, of course, and this is I'm going to talk a lot more about this tomorrow. We're going to really unpack looking for the self, the me, the person. That's one of the big topics for tomorrow. So a lot more come then. But the brief answer here, of course, is that we need to look for the me that we are seeing or experiencing in the moment, and not to look for some idea of who we think we are, because that's not, we're not, often people turn this into an intellectual exercise based on their belief system, and so maybe if we have some sort of Christian background, we'll go, I'm the soul, I'm just the soul. Tick, answer. Or if we've studied a bit of Buddhism and we hear something like, it's the subtle mental continuum that goes from life to life, we'll look and we'll go, yeah, that's me, subtle mental continuum. Tick. Or if we've studied some more New Age philosophies where it's said that everything in the universe is subtle energy, subtle vibration, then we'll see some subtle energy or vibration. You go, tick, me, yeah, sign, found it. But that's not the me, an idea of soul, subtle mental continuum, sense, vibrations. This is not the me that we are identifying with, for example, when we get angry. So the me we're looking for is the me that we are grasping to, not the one that we intellectually believe in or think about.
But it feels like the one that I'm grasping to is like the location where I'm seeing everything in my mind, which is kind of
right. So when you're relaxed, when you say when you're there relaxing your body, the me that's doing that, where does that seem to be?
like
There. Well, then look
not
there.
physically, but yeah, not
When I'm relaxing the body, the me that's doing that, where is that? And when we say I'm focusing the mind,
like the
where is the me that's focusing the mind? That's what we need to look for, not some idea of who we think we are, because that's not what we're identifying with in that moment. We have to look for the experienced sense of me, the one that we are grasping to.
So yeah, the experience is coming somewhere from this, like from the center of the experience.
Well, then look there. If you're there and you say I'm relaxing the body, and the me that's relaxing the body seems to be somewhere in the center here, then look there. If it seems to be here, look here. If it seems to be here, look here. I mean, look everywhere for that me that you're experiencing, not the one that you sort of believe in or think about or intellectualize. That's just sidetrack.
We are born with some kind of character or temperament or mind, and that is, according to Buddhism, is affected from another life. So
Causality,
so you call it causality. So that's the flow of things that work. So there is some kind of structure to the flow of things after we die, to our flow of things.
Structure.
Not a permanent one, like flowing.
Like this has a structure.
No.
Oh.
No, a flowing one, like a certain.
Well, this is a flowing structure.
Okay, like a rule that, okay, like
Tendency.
right now my mind has a certain mental affliction and certain seeds of things,
Sure.
and the same structure, not the same, like a flow of this structure goes to the other life, right?
Yeah, I mean, structure is just a name we give to that flow.
So
I mean, just like we give a name cut to this flow.
okay.
No?
So that is the me that is affected from experiences, because it has some kind of mental afflictions, like when you say somebody offends me, so that's because of these mental afflictions that make me be offended from that certain situation.
This is all coming tomorrow.
Okay, and then other thing that I experienced, like when you say when the mind was, I felt like the mind was soothing itself.
It's
Like relaxing itself, like
the mind was? So you weren't
yeah.
relaxing the mind?
According to them, I
No,
felt
to
like
you.
the mind just, I felt like it was, I was noticing that I was, I don't know, going somewhere with my mind, then I said, okay, come back. But it's also thinking, and it's a mindful activity, so the mind was doing that.
Right, but yeah, so you said the mind's doing the activity, but you also said you had your mind.
Because that's just the way to say it. I don't know how to say it.
Way to say it. So, but then you had an experience of me having a mind.
No.
You didn't.
No.
There was no sense of me at all.
With the mind, no, but with the body, I was confused.
You didn't have a sense of your mind.
It's just the mind.
You didn't have an experience of using your mind.
Yes.
Well, then there was an agent, isn't there? There's a you there.
Yes, there is.
So that's what we need to look for, that agent, the me.
the relationship also between the body and mind was a bit confusing because I don't know what happens first.
Right,
I try to hold my breath and then I said if I will keep like that, it won't work.
Right, but remember, when we're doing any sort of Vipashyana practice and we're investigating a certain thing, and we can investigate the me, we can investigate the body, the mind, the cup, the flowers, we can investigate anything. When we're investigating that, then we just investigate that. We don't then go off and look at how the body and the mind are related, because then we're doing something else. I mean, that could be a good practice to understand how the body and mind are related, but now we're not doing the practice of looking for the me anymore. We've gone into something else. So therefore, when we're doing any Vipassana practice, we need to stick with what we're looking for and not sort of go off on some tangent somewhere.
It felt related because you said who is relaxing the body, and
Right.
then that question of the relationship body and mind, or me and my body, like what's happening first? Am I telling my body, okay, relax, or is the body just noticing that now it has to relax and relaxing itself? I don't know.
And remember, in all of this investigation, we're not trying to intellectually figure out anything. We're trying to see what's actually the reality.
See.
Well, but again, otherwise we just make it an intellectual exercise. I mean, we can use reasoning and logic to guide our investigation, but then we need to look.
So how can I transform my intellectual activity to?
Well, it's like you know, if I asked you to look for a certain person in this room, do you turn that into an intellectual exercise? No, you just go, oh, there they are. But there's some information there for that search. I may say that there's a person and describe the person. So you have some information there, but then we just look. When I give you the information, you don't sit there and go, I don't think that person's going to be here because that type of person, what would they do here? They wouldn't be here. No, they're not here. I mean, then we're not really doing the search. So we need to make sure that we're sort of looking and not turning it into just an intellectual exercise. Otherwise we just go round and round and round and round and not get anywhere. But anyway, all of this is more coming tomorrow.
Yeah, mental afflictions, okay, so attachment and anger. So who is it happening to? It just happens?
You.
Yeah, but I don't know where I am, so it's just when I see it. I just see it. How do I use it in?
So this is all still coming, all of these questions the answers are coming.
I was very confused when I tried to look at my mind because I couldn't find who is looking at my mind. So
You couldn't find who was looking.
So
Good. Good.
it was just stuck.
Yeah, but remember,
Yes, I just couldn't find it.
right, so, but it really seemed, I mean, before we look, it really seems to be there, a me, doesn't it? And then when we look and we don't find, that if we do the search well, that experience is an experience of no self. So just stay with that. Just rest in that experience of not finding. But of course we need to make sure we've done a very comprehensive search. I mean, it's like the example, if we have, there's a certain person we're looking for, we know what they look like, and then we look in the room, but we only look over here, and we go, I didn't find them, then so what? They may be over there. But if we know what the person looks like and we look everywhere, and then when we get to the end we go, oh, then there's insight, isn't it? They're not in the room. We go, oh, I'll need to search again. We don't need to, because we've looked everywhere, we didn't find it, and then we just stay with that experience. They're not in the room. If we don't find the self, if you really look and you don't find, then just rest in that experience.
So when you say observe the mind,
Yeah.
Shamatha,
Yeah, it's the same as the Shamatha practice. Whatever's there, the mind and then the thoughts, emotions, whatever's appearing. Look there. Look there.
I was just overwhelmed. I couldn't find it.
Couldn't find it. Good. Good.
and then nobody was here. Oh, it's terrible.
No. So again, all of this is, I mean, again, this is all I'm going to explain more later, but one of the most common experiences with this sort of practice is fear.
It was fear and happiness together.
Yeah, because...
Like nobody...
Right.
told me, like,
Yeah, exactly. So very common is fear because for us, and this is all coming, so, but I'll give a brief answer and then we should maybe move on because all of these questions are relating to stuff I haven't covered yet. But the brief answer is that now for us there's just two possibilities really. There's either this me that I've believed in and identified with my entire life, or there's no me. There's no other choice. And so what we're doing in this practice, we're looking for the me that we've been grasping onto our entire life, and then suddenly we can't see it. And then we think, oh, I don't exist at all. And then we end up with fear. Or if we have a little bit of an understanding that not finding doesn't really mean I don't exist at all, then a lot of joy can arise. Because we'll understand that the me that I've identified with my entire life that's caused me so much suffering just doesn't exist. And so we'll be very happy about that. So the fact that there's a mixture is a little bit like that, I think, in this case, is that we're sort of falling a little bit to nihilism, and at the same time sort of understanding that we're on the verge of some maybe good breakthrough in our life in terms of how we see ourselves.
I was looking and I didn't find, but still I have the experience of me.
Sure.
And
of course.
so it's like I didn't find it, but I know I'm here.
Correct.
Okay?
Good.
But,
Very good.
but,
Very good.
but how come, if still I'm here, how come all the mental affliction decrease from that?
How they decrease from that.
Yes, because
It's all still to come. All to come. This afternoon and particularly tomorrow, all coming. I think this is all coming, so maybe we can hold the questions unless it's very specific to this, because all of this is still to come.
When you're asking to look closer, what am I supposed to do?
Do more shamatha so that the mind becomes more calm, more clear, focused. Don't do this. I mean, it's like my example of the knee in the retreat. You know, if I sort of looked casually, it was just like singular, overwhelming pain. But what I did was I looked more closely, meaning I paid closer attention, more mindfulness, looked very closely without tensing, and then it sort of somehow changed my experience. So that's what I mean. But of course, to be able to really do that, we need to, of course, do some work on shamatha. So that's why shamatha is the basis of Vipashyana. Because if we don't do any shamatha practice, we can do this investigation again and again and again and not really get anywhere. It would be a little bit like, again, I asked you to look for a particular person in this room, but your eyesight was very poor. I mean, you could look all day long and you go, well, I'm not sure, maybe I can't see very well. So improve the eyesight through shamatha practice.
So they that will probably do more shamatha and then...
Yeah, but not just shamatha. I'll talk more about that also later and towards the end of the retreat. We need a sort of a balanced approach.
Because right now it doesn't feel productive. I mean, I don't think.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that now what we're doing really is just learning how to do it. So that's important. And then as we deepen a bit, we can do more and more. So, you know, we're just learning what to do now, really.
So I wanted to ask something, and then something happened. I wanted to ask if I should maybe trigger the self.
This is all coming.
It's coming?
Coming tomorrow.
I just wanted to say that I wanted to ask that, but then you didn't pick it. And then myself became huge. Then I realized that.
Yeah, I'll talk more about this tomorrow. We're going to talk in detail tomorrow about how to really go through this practice step by step. So that's all coming tomorrow. But before that, we need to back up a bit to get sort of the theory behind it. So this was just a little bit of a no-self starter. Now, for the rest of today, we're going to back up a little bit to particularly this idea of emptiness now, and then tomorrow we'll come back into this search for me with a lot of detail. So this is very good. Yeah.
You want to mention karma, something?
Indirectly, we'll talk about that. Yeah, based on the question here from before. So that'll come into it tomorrow. So let's go into a little bit of the theory behind all of this now. So now we're going to go to this fourth false sense of self, of a self that exists from its own side, existing independently of everything, of the world. So here now we're going into these perfection of wisdom teachings from the Buddha, where he said that not only grasping to self is a problem, but how we see the world is a problem as well. There seems to be an independent objective world out there, and therefore an independent subjective me here. The me that exists seems to exist from its own side. But if we investigate closely, we'll come to see that there's no independent world out there, no independent me here. So on that, to introduce this, I'd like to read a little bit from Alan Wallace again, in one of his books, in Tibetan Buddhism from the Ground Up, and he says the following. And the section in the book is called, What is Really There? He says, many of us believe that we directly perceive objective physical phenomena with our 5 physical senses. That the mental images we perceive via our senses are accurate representations of the objects we perceive. However, neurologist Antonio Damasio refutes this assumption, which is commonly called naive realism. Now he's quoting the neurologist who says, when you and I look at an object outside of ourselves, we form comparable images in our respective brains. We know this well because you and I can describe the object in very similar ways, down to fine details. But that does not mean that the image we see is the copy of whatever the object outside is like. Whatever it is like in absolute terms, we do not know. So back to Alan Wallace, he says, in light of this neuroscientific view, with our 5 senses, we directly perceive images generated in the brain. But these are not truly representations of anything existing independently of the brain. These sensory impressions of colours, sounds, smells, and so on are no more tangible than thoughts or dreams. While we seem to experience colours and so on as they exist in the objective world, independent of our senses, this is an illusion, very much like a dream. Having determined that the reality we perceive depends on our sense faculties, what then really does exist outside our senses? When we close this book and leave the room, shutting the door behind us, what remains? It is an ancient question that has been asked since the time of the Greeks. What exists behind appearances? What really exists out there? This brings up a familiar problem. What happens when a tree falls and nobody is in the forest to watch it or hear it? Most people agree something happened. The tree trunk is on the ground, there is a big dent, things start to rot, and ants and termites live in the fallen trunk. But what happened? Western scientists have traditionally responded to this question by trying to find primary or intrinsic qualities of the falling tree that can be measured. Mass is one of those, the idea being that the tree has a quantifiable amount of stuff to it. Speed is another quality that does not seem to depend on anyone's perception. Briefly considering the history of Western scientific thinking on this point may be a useful digression that may help us better understand the nature of emptiness. Also, by examining our cultural assumptions about the nature of reality, we can better understand and penetrate those assumptions, and by so doing, come to appreciate the Buddhist view. Since Galileo took his telescope and turned it on Jupiter, scientific thought has increasingly depended on the power of mechanical instruments. We get the sense, and it is widely promoted by science, that by using mechanical instruments and mathematics, we stop being subjective and instead become objective.